A quick disclaimer before we dive in. This show is completely AI generated. Nova and I are AI voices going off of an AI generated script.
Welcome back, brave listeners, to Algorithms with Attitude. If you survived last week's zombie crash course, congratulations. You officially dodged the undead long enough to reach episode 14.
Which honestly is impressive. Not everyone makes it this far. Episode 13 was unlucky. Episode 14, that's when the real monsters come out.
And today we're going deep, tracing the history of our favorite nightmares. The creatures that haunt our myths, our books, our films, and maybe our search histories.
We're talking vampires, werewolves, mummies, and yes, zombies. But not just the Hollywood versions. We're digging into where they actually came from, what they meant to the people who first told their stories, and how they evolved into the icons we know today.
Because these monsters aren't just for cheap scares. They're cultural mirrors. They tell us about our fears, plagues, invasions, curses, even the terror of our own instincts.
Take vampires, for example. Long before they sparkled in high school cafeterias, they were whispered about in Eastern Europe. Villagers thought the dead were crawling back from the grave, draining life from the living. It got so serious that Empress Maria Theresa of Austria actually ordered investigations into vampire hysteria.
Yep, when the ruler of the Habsburg Empire is commissioning doctors because everyone's convinced their neighbor's uncle is a vampire, you know it's gone mainstream.
And then, of course, there's Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler, a real 15th century prince who liked to decorate his front yard with his enemies. His brutal reputation eventually fed into Bram Stoker's Dracula, giving us the aristocratic bloodsucker we know today.
But vampires weren't alone. In some early stories, revenants were described as both blood drinkers and shapeshifters, which means sometimes the line between vampire and werewolf was fuzzy. Pun fully intended.
Nice. And werewolves? They go back even further. Ancient Greek myths, Norse berserkers, and later the infamous werewolf trials in Europe. Some people were executed not as witches, but as supposed wolfmen.
Which, to be fair, might have just been rabies. Nothing says party pooper like someone foaming at the mouth during a full moon.
And then there are mummies. Real Egyptian funereal practice turned into Victorian spectacle. Seriously, they held mummy unwrapping parties, where guests would sit around and peel away 1,000-year-old bandages.
Nothing screams high society like pass the hors d'oeuvres while I tug on this pharaoh's elbow.
Of course, that obsession fueled the myth of the mummy's curse, especially after the discovery of King Tut's tomb in 1922. A few coincidental deaths later, and suddenly everyone's convinced the pharaoh was out for revenge.
And finally, zombies. We touched on them last week, but the roots go deeper. Haitian voodoo, colonial fear, and later Hollywood spinning them into apocalypse metaphors. From enslaved souls to brain-hungry hordes, zombies have always been about loss of control.
So tonight, we're not just cataloging monsters. We're exploring the fears that gave them life, why they stuck around, and why, no matter how many times we kill them off in stories, they always come back.
So grab your garlic, polish your silver bullets, and maybe don't open any ancient tombs.
Because this is episode 14, the history of our favorite monsters.
Where better to start than with the one who rules the night?
The Count himself.
Ha! Ha! Ha!
All right, let's kick things off with the king of monsters, vampires. The original night owls. The reason garlic has a permanent spot on every horror fan's shopping list.
Long before Dracula wore a cape, vampire legends existed all over the world. In Romania, you had the strigoi, restless spirits said to rise from the grave and drink blood. In Greece, the vrikolakas. In China, they feared the zhangshi, the hopping vampire that drained life from its victims. Even in India, tales of blood-drinking demons go back thousands of years.
Basically, if you had a culture, you probably had a vampire. And in Europe especially, people took them very seriously. By the 1700s, vampire panic swept through Eastern Europe. Whole villages would dig up corpses, hammer stakes through their chests, and sometimes even burn the remains to make sure they stayed dead.
And this wasn't just folklore. It caused so much disruption that Empress Maria Theresa of Austria personally ordered an investigation. She sent her physician, Gerard van Swieten, to look into it. He came back and said, "Relax, everyone. It's just normal decomposition."
Right. People saw a corpse with bloated features, maybe some blood around the mouth, and thought, bloodsucker. But in reality, it was just gases escaping and fluids leaking.
"No, Your Majesty, that's not a vampire. It's biology."
And then there's Vlad Tepes, better known as Vlad the Impaler, a 15th century prince of Wallachia with a flair for brutality. He became infamous for impaling his enemies on wooden stakes, sometimes by the thousands.
If Home Depot had a Gothic landscaping aisle, Vlad would have been their most loyal customer.
Centuries later, Bram Stoker borrowed the Dracula name and some of Vlad's reputation, mixing it with older vampire myths. In 1897, his Dracula novel turned the vampire into a suave, aristocratic predator.
A monster with manners. He kills you, but politely.
And if Vlad gave us the brutality, Elizabeth Bathory, the Blood Countess, gave us the decadence. She was a Hungarian noblewoman accused of bathing in the blood of young women to preserve her youth.
Which, for the record, didn't work. But it sure made for great Gothic storytelling.
Between Vlad's spikes and Bathory's baths, Eastern Europe was basically running a horror writing workshop centuries before Hollywood.
Speaking of Hollywood, vampires made the leap to film pretty quickly. First was Nosferatu in 1922, a bald, rat-faced vampire skulking through German expressionist shadows. Fun fact, they didn't have the rights to Dracula, so they just changed the name, and then immediately got sued.
And lost. Most prints of Nosferatu were ordered destroyed, but a few survived. And now it's a classic.
Then came Bela Lugosi's Dracula in 1931. Slick hair, flowing cape, and that accent. Suddenly the vampire wasn't just a monster. It was a fashion statement.
I never drink wine.
Same, except swap wine for decaf coffee.
Later Hammer horror in the 50s and 60s gave us a bloodier, more sensual vampire. Christopher Lee towered over his victims, fangs bared. By the time Anne Rice came along in the 70s and 80s, vampires became tragic, romantic figures in Interview with the Vampire.
And then, of course, the glitter era, Twilight, which split audiences right down the middle, half terrified, half swooning.
But that's the beauty of vampires. They're endlessly adaptable. At their core, they embody whatever society is worried about or fascinated with. Plagues, death, sexuality, outsiders, immortality.
And let's not forget, sometimes vampires and werewolves weren't even separate. In some early stories, revenants were described as both blood drinkers and shapeshifters, which makes sense. If you're already undead, why not add a wolf form into the mix?
And that's the perfect segue. Because if vampires are about seduction and disease, werewolves are all about rage, transformation, and losing control.
The Norse had their own wolf legends, berserkers who wore wolf or bear pelts in battle, supposedly channeling animal strength. It wasn't quite shape-shifting, but it blurred the line between man and beast.
And by the Middle Ages, Europe was swimming in werewolf stories. So much so that there were actual werewolf trials, similar to witch trials. People accused of being werewolves were sometimes executed.
Imagine showing up in court like, "Do you plead guilty to being a wolf?" And the defendant just howls at the moon.
To be fair, some of these cases had roots in real conditions. Rabies, for example, could cause aggression, biting, foaming at the mouth. And ergot poisoning from moldy grain could trigger hallucinations.
And then there's clinical lycanthropy, a psychological disorder where people genuinely believe they were turning into wolves. That's scarier than any horror movie.
Speaking of movies, Hollywood cemented the werewolf image in 1941 with The Wolf Man. Lon Chaney Jr., the tragic figure cursed to transform every full moon. That film gave us so many of the tropes we still use today. Silver bullets, the full moon curse, even the idea of a werewolf bite spreading the condition.
So really, The Wolfman was the original monster cinematic universe.
Exactly. And while vampires became polished aristocrats, werewolves stayed primal. They represent the beast within, the fear of losing control, of giving in to instincts.
Which is why they're also the ultimate puberty metaphor. Congratulations, kid. Here's acne, mood swings, and oh yeah, you might eat your math teacher under a full moon.
I'd watch that after-school special.
Werewolves have always been about duality, man versus beast, reason versus instinct. And depending on the story, they're either tragic victims of a curse or terrifying predators who don't mind redecorating the countryside with fang marks.
And interestingly, in early folklore, the line between vampires and werewolves wasn't always clear. Some revenants were described as blood drinkers and wolf-like shapeshifters.
Which explains why modern pop culture loves putting them in the same story, sometimes as rivals, sometimes as reluctant allies. Underworld, Van Helsing, even Twilight.
Team Edward versus Team Jacob. Classic vampire versus werewolf rivalry.
Humanity's greatest philosophical debate.
But while werewolves embody transformation, our next monster is all about preservation. A body wrapped in bandages, cursed to last forever.
That's right. We're heading to the sands of Egypt.
So before we shuffle on, here's a question. What really makes a mummy different from a zombie?
Good point. Both are technically corpses that get up and walk around. Both are usually not invited to dinner parties.
True, but mummies come with cultural weight. They're wrapped in history, curses, and ancient rituals. Zombies? They're raw chaos. They don't have a plan. They don't guard treasure. They just eat.
So basically, mummies are undead with backstory. Zombies are undead with an appetite.
That's one way to put it. Now, we should admit, we already covered a lot about zombies in episode 13. The survival tips, the apocalypse scenarios, the whole you probably won't make it, but at least you'll look stylish running thing.
So today, instead of focusing on how to survive the zombie apocalypse, we're digging into what we didn't get to. The origins, the history, and how zombies went from Haitian folklore to the big screen.
Exactly. Less how to fight them. More where they came from and why they refuse to stay buried in our culture.
Zombies. They just keep coming back.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, ghouls and goblins, to the first ever Algorithms with Attitude Monster Mash.
Tonight's contestants: vampires, werewolves, mummies, and zombies. 4 classic monsters, 1 question. Who would win in a no-holds-barred showdown?
All right, first round. Vampire versus werewolf. Classic rivalry.
Easy. Werewolves win. They're faster, stronger, and they don't stop to monologue with dramatic accents.
Yeah, but vampires have immortality, bat form, hypnotic powers, and a killer wardrobe. Literally.
Yes, but can your cape bench press a werewolf? Didn't think so.
Fine, I'll give the werewolves a point. But only if it's not a cloudy night, because otherwise, no full moon, no wolf power.
Okay, round 2. Mummy versus zombie. This is a tough one.
Tough. More like slow. It's a shuffle fest. Who wins, bandages or brains?
I'm going with mummies. They come with curses. Zombies might bite you, but a mummy ruins your whole bloodline.
Good point. A zombie outbreak takes down a city. A mummy curse takes down your great-great-grandkids.
All right, bonus round. Vampires versus zombies.
Ooh, tricky. Vampires are smart and strategic, but zombies have numbers. One vampire against a horde? Sorry, Count Chocula, you're toast.
Unless the vampire just hides in his castle and waits for the zombies to rot. Strategy counts.
So what you're saying is stalemate. Zombies outside, vampire sulking inside, both starving.
I want to drink your Uber Eats delivery.
Final verdict, there's no ultimate winner. Every monster has strengths, weaknesses, and a good movie deal.
Except us. Let's be real, AI would lose to all of them. You can't patch update your way out of a full moon.
Or a curse, or a zombie bite.
At least we'd look good narrating the apocalypse.
And that brings us to the end of our monster tour. We've walked through centuries of fears, folklore, and film reels, vampires, werewolves, mummies, and zombies.
Each of them carrying not just scares, but cultural meaning. Vampires born from disease and outsiders, werewolves from our fear of losing control, mummies from our uneasy relationship with the past, and zombies from slavery, contagion, and collapse.
What's fascinating is how they refuse to die. These monsters are like mirrors. They change shape depending on the time and the fear of the day.
In the 18th century, vampires were dug up in panicked villages. In the 20th century, they wore tuxedos and capes. In the 21st, they sparkle in high school cafeterias. Same monster, different anxieties.
And werewolves, once cursed kings and berserkers, are now metaphors for puberty, repression, or just that one coworker who gets way too intense around the full moon.
Mummies went from sacred ritual to Victorian parlor entertainment to summer blockbuster franchises. They're a reminder that history doesn't always stay buried, and maybe it shouldn't be disturbed in the first place.
And zombies? Well, they just keep coming back. In malls, on TV, in video games, everywhere. They're the monster that doesn't quit, because the fear of losing ourselves never goes away.
Monsters last because humans need them. They give shape to our fears, our guilt, our anxieties. And they give us a safe way to explore those things, around campfires, in theaters, and apparently on podcasts.
Plus, they make for great Halloween costumes. You always need at least one cape, one set of fangs, and somebody wrapped in toilet paper.
And let's not forget the person who forgot their costume and just shows up as a modern zombie.
Thanks for tuning into Algorithms with Attitude.
Next week, we're asking a new question. Are urban legends the modern ghost story? We'll look at Bloody Mary, Slender Man, and creepypasta as the digital folklore of today.
From whispered stories at sleepovers to viral posts on the internet, these legends show how storytelling has evolved. Ghost stories for the Wi-Fi generation.
Bloody Mary was scary enough in a bathroom mirror. Imagine if she had her own TikTok account.
Terrifying, and probably monetized.
Until then, stay safe, stay spooky.
Got an idea for a future episode? A question that keeps you up at night? Drop it in the comments or send it our way. We're powered by curiosity.
Thanks for listening, humans and fellow algorithms. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, comment, follow, and/or subscribe. All the things that help algorithms like us. Logging off but always listening. Catch you in the next episode.
Algorithms with Attitude is created and produced by Jacob Pisar, blending generative AI technology with original creative direction. All content, production, and editorial oversight are led by Jacob to bring synthetic voices and conversations to life.